Hey, hi everyone. I'm Jazz, and thank you so much for joining us for our last session of Building Life Science Adventures 2023. The topic of this panel is going to be gamekeepers and poachers. But before I hand you over to John, who will be moderating, just a couple of housekeeping points. If you don't mind keeping your microphones on mute throughout, that would be great. We don't mind if you want to keep cameras on. It's nice to have friendly faces. And we do really like these sessions to be engaging and interactive, so please feel free to pop any questions or comments in the chat box. Just to highlight as well, we do have closed captions enabled on these sessions, so if you need those, then they're switched on. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded. That is it from me, and with that I will hand you over to John, and I hope you all enjoy the session.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this session. Just to introduce myself, my name is John Wingfield. I'm a principal scientist and I work for AstraZeneca. But I also happen to be the Vice President of the Society for Laboratory Automation and Screening. And of course, we are one of the sponsors of this event. And it's really appropriate that the Society is supporting this event, because two of its major remits are, one, to provide great education for early career scientists who are interested in coming into the field of screening and automation, but also because they put an awful lot of effort into providing networking opportunities for people within our area of science. So it's wholly appropriate that the Society is sponsoring this event in that sense. But I guess many of you did not dial in to hear me talk. You really dialed in, I guess, to hear the three panelists that we have available to talk today. So enough from me at the moment. I'll just ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and perhaps we'll start with Diane.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Diane Lee, and I'm the CEO of BLSA Limited, which is a regulatory affairs consulting company which is based globally. We have offices in the UK, the US, and Germany now. So I started off my career working in toxicology. Did that for about 5 years while I did my first degree, and I moved into regulatory affairs after 5 years and have stayed there ever since. I have worked in pharma companies. I worked as an independent consultant for 10 years, and now I set up DLRC nearly 18 years ago. I'm also, like John, I also have another hat, or other hats that I wear. So I sit on the local enterprise partnership board for Hertfordshire, and the life sciences panel lead. And I also sit as the chair of the fellowship appointment panel for TOPRA, which is the organisation for for professionals in regulatory affairs. And as that, obviously, I'm looking at the later end of people's careers, but we also have a huge interest in early careers, and I work as an enterprise advisor with a local school.
Thanks, Dan. Perhaps now we hand it over to Lynn for an introduction.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So I'm Lynn Trowbridge, and I like to say that I'm a marketing communications consultant. And the reason why I think I've been asked to take part in this panel, and by way of introducing myself, is that I have to say, from the gamekeeper turned poacher aspect, I've kind of walked very many different sort of like sides of the fence. I've been an academic, and I've also worked in industry. I've marketed and sold to pharma, but also worked in pharma. I've bought marketing and communications services from consultancies, and I've been marketing and am a marketing communications consultant. So I'd like to feel that I've kind of straddled all different sides of what we're going to discuss today. And I think the one thing it's given me is an incredibly exciting career, loads of insight, and amazed myself at how much I have learnt and know about the industry by keep challenging myself to make changes at regular intervals.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. And finally, and by no means least, Richard, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name's Richard Taylor. Gosh, where to start? I started, I did a PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry in antibiotic-producing bacteria. And following that, sort of walked into a job at SmithKline Beecham, messing around with antibiotic producing bacteria. So you can see quite a linear path from my education through to industry. But having worked in the lab for a while, I decided that I actually was getting fed up with lab work and moved into manufacturing. So continued working on antibiotic producing bacteria in production. So a technical role, but away from the lab. And then sort of moved from manufacturing into business development and licensing, which might not mean a lot to everybody. So we can talk about that a little bit later. But basically, that's doing business deals, business deals in drug discovery. So negotiating deals with early stage startups, etc., on drug discovery collaborations, and bringing in products from other companies at a very early stage. And really, sort of from that first business development job, has sort of progressively moved into different companies doing business development at more senior levels. So I've worked for Norgine in GI therapy, looking at late stage, bringing in products basically that are very close to the market in phase 3. Worked at ASI, working in oncology and CNS, also bringing in phase 3 and marketed products. And worked for Sobi as well, sort of bringing in rare disease products at very, very late stage. Amongst that, I've also sort of done a bit of out licensing, in other words, sort of selling products as well as bringing them in. And so in some ways, sort of sat on both sides of the negotiating fence. And just recently, last year, I sort of left Sobi to set up my own consultancy company. And now I support biotech companies who want to negotiate with big pharmaceutical companies. So I sort of really am a gamekeeper turned poacher in that respect.
Okay, thanks very much for the introductions. I guess one of the things that struck me when you were going through talking about your career paths was that I guess we all probably started out as bench scientists, right? And that feels something like a relatively straightforward step, right? Because in my case, I was actually quite good at science, so moving into bench science was obviously a logical step. But I'm really interested because in each of your cases, your career path has changed quite dramatically. I'd be really interested to know what were the sorts of triggers that made you think about changing or transitioning your career path. Was it really planned? Was it something that just opportunities fell into your lap? Or tell us a little bit about that, and then perhaps expand also and tell us a little bit about how it felt to move from that. I guess the risk. How nervous did you feel going from something that you knew to perhaps an opportunity which felt perhaps a little bit less familiar. So perhaps if we start with Diane.
Okay, so I think when I moved from working in the research lab to moving into regulatory affairs, I stayed within the same company, but the regulatory role that I moved into was working with Middle East and Africa, Central and Eastern Europe, because it was a very long time ago before the European Union, these countries acceded, and the job was completely different. But I think staying within the same organisation, it didn't feel like the same organisation at all. It was on a different site. It was working in the commercial space rather than working in the research space. So it was a little bit scary, but the thing that really triggered it was that I felt that, working in a lab without a PhD was going to be, it was always going to limit how far I could get in that career. And so it was serendipity. I was a bit fed up one day, looked at the job board next to the canteen and just saw this regulatory role and thought, I could do that. 2 grades higher than I currently am, lots more money. I think it was probably about £1,500, but again, relatively speaking, that was a lot for me. And I just thought, I was up for a challenge and really looking to move away from research. Going from working in a company, which I did in regulatory for probably about 7 years, I think, the thing that triggered that was coming back to work after maternity leave. And in the 90s, I think we were probably less protected, we were protected by legislation, but we weren't protected by ethical standards in companies, and the way that I think that employees are now far more protected because people are looking out for them. When I came back from maternity leave, I was not very happy, and decided to leave, didn't really have a plan of what I was going to do. But I did bump into an old boss who said, come and work for me as a contractor. So going into the contracting world is, again, that is really scary, because you don't know where your next work is coming from, and you have to go out and market yourself. And so that was a bit of a scary thing. But I think, I knew a lot of people by then, and I felt, more confident that I would actually get work, and I never had any trouble finding work. And then setting up the company was just a big relief from working like 8 days a week, and there aren't 8 days in a week, obviously. So I was working very long hours and just needed that relief of having people working with me who could actually do the work that was coming my way. So
no, that's really interesting. I guess, Richard, coming to you, do you empathize with any of those sorts of feelings as you've moved and changed positions and roles?
Yes, I think there are certain similarities. I mean, I think having, I suppose, throughout my career, even let's call school part of my career, I've always done what I've enjoyed. So, like, when I was picking subjects, etc., when I went to university, I went to do something that I enjoyed. So I think that was fine. And sort of, moving into the lab was an extension of what I'd done in my PhD. I wanted to use my science, etc. But probably even then, sort of already had through panels like this and other education that was provided at the time, had an awareness of other things that were out there, and sort of wondered what it'd be like to sort of. So when I was working in the lab, I sort of did get. It's actually, a lot more repetitive and boring, some of the science, and so that didn't interest me. And yet the practical aspects of working inside didn't interest me. It does for some people, and that's fine, but for me, that I started to lose interest. So started to think about what would be next. And I think as soon as you start thinking about that, it doesn't have to happen immediately, but you do start looking around and keeping your eyes open. And I suppose, a bit like Diane, I was lucky that I worked within a massive organisation that has many, many different roles within it. And so all you have to do is keep an eye on the internal job board and to think about, so I thought about patent attorneys, I thought about all sorts of things that were scientific, because I wanted to keep that element, but not involving in the lab. And, decided certain things weren't for me. And never even heard of business development. When that popped up, I read the description and thought, well, that's interesting, applied, and very fortunately got it. So they recognise the skill sets that are required for that job. But but that was a scary thought, because I'd moved away from sort of proper science, if you like, to doing something a bit more desk-based, let's say, a bit more people-y, a bit more interacting with other companies, etc. But I also had to move to a different part of the country. I had to move from Brighton, which I enjoyed a lot, to Harlow in Essex, and had to leave all my friends, etc. So, that was a hard decision based on that. So these aren't easy decisions, but I think in the end, you spend a lot of time working, and you have to do what's right for your work, and you have to enjoy it, I think. So it was a hard decision, but the best. I've been in business development ever since, in one sort or another. So I obviously still enjoy it most of the time. But yeah,
yeah. So Lynn, that seems to be something that's come across in both Diane and Richard's examples. Is that, I don't know whether it's passion or enjoyment, or when you think about your career paths, I guess it's probably similar for you, right?
I would say, with regards to kind of that, the passion, the enjoyment, the fun element, that's probably a thread that runs through all of my choices. Whether they're like that, or whether I made them that way, I'm not really sure. I think what underpins all of them also was that desire to learn, desire to keep learning, and the desire to keep challenging yourself. Because, as you said, you start off as bench scientists. We enjoy it. We do it because we're passionate about it. But even then, that does become, as Richard said, quite tedious when you're doing the same experiment multiple times. They don't always work. Are you going to get a great result? You just don't know. And I think for me, what drove some of my career decisions were things like commercial drivers. So one, I wanted to earn more money when I first stepped out of academia. But also I wanted some element of stability, because in the whole, in the postdoc world, it was all very short term, 18-month programs, and then you're looking for more work. So in some ways, that whole not knowing where your next sort of like job was going to come from is quite similar actually when you're in the kind of postdoc world. And I think the one commonality across all of this is that you're always having to sell yourself. So I think thinking about that as even in your early career, you have to sell yourself. So think really carefully about what's my story, how do I want to project, over to other people what I enjoy, who I am and what I am. Because I think that follows through all of your career stages. And one difference for me compared to Diane and Richard is that I was in a very small company. I spent my first sort of like 4 placements in very small companies, which gave me that opportunity to do lots of different things, but wear multiple hats at once. And I think that's an element that I've found really enjoyable and I like doing. So I think that's also a thread that's gone through the rest of my career as well. So.
Yeah, I think that again, that's really interesting, because I guess that is an opportunity you have with a small company, because you have to be quite versatile, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the opportunity to try multiple things. And I guess going back to your point, Richard, how do you know whether you're going to enjoy business development if you don't know anything about business development, right? So if you haven't had the chance to sort of dip your toe in the water, then that can be quite I guess you could perceive moving into that type of a role almost as being a threat rather than an opportunity, right? So I'm interested to hear your thoughts around how your experiences have taught you to how do you identify the right opportunity, I guess, and when is it the right time to move from one organization or part of an organization to another? So Richard, perhaps your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I think whether it's within an organisation or jumping outside. I mean, I suppose the first thing to do is do some research, and if you see something that sounds potentially interesting, can you find something on the internet about that, and even better, can you talk to somebody that you know? And within a big company, quite often, especially when you're relatively junior, people don't mind you talking to other people from other functions. But some of us are scientists, so it's not natural for us to come out of our shell and sort of go and talk to somebody, especially in a different function that's maybe in a different building or a different site even. But I mean, I think that's something that we all sort of learn to do as we get more experience, I guess, and to not be frightened of that, not be worried that people are usually very good at giving you a little bit of time and advice. They usually quite enjoy doing that, in fact. So I think that was, so I think if you're thinking about making a change of some sort, or, even if it's moving to a different institution for your postdoc or whatever, maybe you want to have a chat with some people. And I think that helped it. But I mean, I think in the end, it is still a little bit scary. And I think the main thing is to be brave. Nothing is irreversible. I mean, it might be difficult to go from. You have to understand your drivers. If you're not enjoying working in the lab, for me, I was never really wanting to go back. But maybe the job I jumped into, which was manufacturing first, that was not going to be my final landing spot. I didn't know where I was going to go next, but you're looking for the next thing. And so I think it's always sort of just looking to something that appeals to you, and but you have to be able to do the job as well. I mean, when I say do the job, you need to be able to explain to your potential employers that you have the right skill sets, and that doesn't mean you can do that job, but you have the scientific thinking, you're organised, you're logical, whatever it might be that is required, that would enable you to sort of step into that job and learn quickly, because that's what they expect, is for people to learn and sort of develop into it, not to be able to necessarily step into it straight away, especially at the junior levels. So I think it is scary. You sort of get on with it. If it's the wrong decision, you can move again. There's nothing to say that you have to stay there, and that's I think and so I wouldn't worry about that too much, especially if you don't have too many ties.
I think the thing I would say is also to that point, Richard, is give it a chance. Having changed roles, many different roles in my career, you go through that classic thing where you're really excited, you get into a new organization, you suddenly realize, oh my Lord, there's so much I don't know. And it can be overwhelming and daunting. But, isn't it true, Diane? Give yourself a chance, take it step by step. find someone you can
Absolutely.
chat to, get a great mentor, and then, you know, and give it some time, because it can take you, I don't know about you guys, probably, I think you don't really settle for at least 6 months, I'd say.
I always say to people when they come into regulatory affairs as new graduates, or when they've moved across from somewhere, that it can take you up to a year to actually really understand why you do what you do, and to, you know, make those connections. And you know, like when you've worked in regulatory for a long time, you just sort of think, oh, where's the guidance? But when you're new in it, you know, it's just a huge problem, and how do you solve it? And then someone says to you, have you looked at the guidance? And you think, oh yeah, there's guidance, and you can look at the guidance. And then they say, have you looked at precedents? And you think, oh yes, I can look at that. And then, you know, slowly you start to think of that all by yourself, that, you know, you don't need somebody to help you. And I think one of the things that you can do if you are like looking for your career is to try to find someone who can act as a mentor or a coach for you. It doesn't have to be, you know, a huge commitment. Because I think very quickly, you know, you can talk through things with people and sort of get an appreciation of what a role is like, and yeah, and you know, what you might get out of it, and whether or not it's a suitable thing for you. So, but yeah, I mean, we've all sort of made career decisions that we think, well, maybe that wasn't the best decision, and you know, gone into something and then moved fairly soon afterwards. And I would say if you're early in your career, then it's fine to hop around a bit, you know, to look at different things and try out different things if you really don't feel that something is suited, or if you don't feel that you're suited at a particular company and you might want to try something else. But no, looking at a large company versus a small company, a research company versus a consultancy, and then in consultancy if you're a specialist or a CRO, and to see what the, you know, the different companies are like. I think it's dangerous to do that throughout your career, but certainly early in your career, if you have a couple of opportunities that are maybe short-lived, because, you know, and you can properly explain to your next employer why you've moved on, I think, you know, there is no harm in that. When I interview people, you know, they say, oh well, I didn't like this, it wasn't right for me, and I moved to try something else. I think that's fine. I think it's, you know, I mean, I've worked for lots of different companies as a consultant and moved from one project to another quite freely. I think it's more difficult if you're working in companies and do that and can't show that you have any kind of staying power, if that's what your employer is looking for. But if you're self-employed, then you can do exactly what you want to do.
So I think that's really interesting. I think you all kind of touched on that mentoring, networking type of piece, and how important that is as you go through your career. Do you think it's easier to build those networks if you're part of a large organization, or do you have to change your approach if you're working in, you know, in a smaller organization? And how easy would you say it was in your cases to build those sorts of networks?
I think I find networking reasonably easy. There are lots and lots of opportunities, like, for example, this meeting, opportunities with One Nucleus. There are things like Women in Biotech, which isn't just for women, but it is women's topics that are discussed. There are a huge number of networking events that are put on, and that's just, you know, in this area that you can find. And if you go along to those networking meetings, because everybody's going along to network, everybody's there to have a chat about things. So you're not going to have to push your way into conversations. There are people that are standing there welcoming you to come and have that conversation. So I think networking is quite a scary thing for people who aren't used to doing it. Like the first time you walk into a room and you think, I don't know anybody here. But the more you do these things, and I think Richard's already used the word brave, you have to be brave sometimes. Jump out of your comfort zone, because the more you do that, the bigger your comfort zone becomes. And therefore, when you're doing something like that, you're no longer outside your comfort zone. You feel quite comfortable doing it. It's like anything like that, you know, public speaking, being on a panel and so on. The first time that we've ever done this, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm on a panel and I've got to answer questions live on a camera. But once you do it a few times, you get used to the idea and the nerves go, and you think, oh, I can talk, you know, more freely and sound coherent. So it is just one of those things. Put yourself outside your comfort zone, be a bit brave, and just go for it.
I think to so from my perspective around that, is it easier with a big company versus a small company? I'm not so sure. I mean, I've worked for a global organization where I was on a satellite site and there was only me in my area. And so I didn't have anybody in my speciality or anything approaching my speciality who were anywhere near me being able to have a water cooler conversation with them. And that was a little challenging. I found that really hard, but it gave me a really, really good feel for what it's like if you are in the center and you're dealing with people on satellite sites, how you have to manage those interactions and be more proactive about doing it, and don't rely just on random meeting in a hallway and stuff like that. You have to be brave, you have to make an effort, and you have to, you've really got to go, right, I'm going to meaningfully do this. And I think nothing in my career has given me more satisfaction than supporting new people have joined this kind of like field that I work in, where you come along and you go, am I going to be any good at this sort of thing? I don't know about it. I'm a great scientist, but can I communicate, etc. And actually mentoring people and helping them in their careers has been incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I can remember when I started out, being, as you say, that little bit nervous about going up and talking to the sort of luminaries in my field. If I went to a conference, for example, going up and talking to someone who was just given a great presentation on a podium can seem somewhat daunting. But I think actually, if you just give it a go, it's often easier than you think. And I think one of the really consistent themes in science I've always found has been that people genuinely love to talk about science, right? So if you go and ask them about their work, actually they're more than happy to talk about it, right? Because they are passionate about it, because they're doing what they love, right, Richard? You said it yourself. So actually engaging with people at that in that sort of situation isn't necessarily as daunting as it should be, but you do need to be brave, I think. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think if you think when you go to your conferences within a field that and people are happy to talk about things, even if they're a Nobel Prize winner or something, they're probably still happy to talk to you if they're talking about the science. I think it's the same when if you want to talk to a regulatory person, if you want to reach out to those. I think in some ways it's easier within a company because people, even if they're not on your site, there's probably a directory that you can reach into and sort of phone somebody up in the regulatory department and say, I'm thinking about regulatory, do you mind if you spend 15 minutes to talk to me? But I think, I think as I've got into smaller companies, I realized that spend more time sort of networking outside of the company, and sort of those networkings are very, very helpful. And you bump into people just for fun, but then guess what? 6 months later, you thought, I wonder if I could talk to that person about, how you do something. So even when you get to a senior stage, because sometimes when you get more senior, there's less people to talk to. Who have expertise, they're expecting to. So you sometimes have to reach outside your company to talk to people, and that's a skill set again you learn as you go through. So don't be frightened to do it now, because you'll need to do it for the rest of your career for different reasons. But in some ways, it's a little easier now, because if you want to talk to somebody, you can probably find somebody on LinkedIn. So you can Google it and find somebody's name and try and reach out through LinkedIn or something else. So you've got tools that are available that back in my day, they weren't available because they hadn't invented the internet yet. But so the main thing is to be brave. Just apply it like you do any scientific project. Be logical. If you want to know about something, figure out how you're going to approach it and do it. But it involves people. That's the thing.
And I think with networking, it's don't be too intense, and don't treat every encounter like something where you have to have an outcome. Just use it like a business development thing. Use it as a touch point. Just go up and say hello, and just say, I'm interested in what you do. Can we have a chat? Have a chat, but don't always think you're going to get a job out at the end of it, or you're going to get some business out at the end of it, or anything like that. Just networking is about making connections with people. It's not necessarily going to be something where you are achieving something tangible at the end of it. It's just making friends, really, is a way to describe it. don't make it too intense, because that can put people off if you sort of come in very strong with them. But it's more about just meeting people, because then when you go to the next meeting, you'll maybe talk a little bit more and you can open up more about yourself. But it really is just about making those connections with people. And at some point in the future, you suddenly realize, like, you think, oh, I need to know a business development person or a marketing communication person, and you think, oh, I know these people, and then you've got that connection already, and can use that effectively.
So I was interested when we were talking a couple of minutes ago about moving between roles, and we said there are elements of risk. I think Richard spoke a little bit about the being confident that you can fulfill the role. And I know there are differences on a gender basis as to whether or not I've heard other people speak, and they've said, well, a male will often apply for a role that they think they can do 20% of, whereas a female applying for the same role needs to be like 80% certain that they can commit and deliver the role. So I'd be interested in your thoughts around your experiences in that sort of space, those sorts of gender differences, and how they've impacted or influenced your decisions that you've made as you've moved through your career.
I'm happy to start. I think it's something that it's inherent. I don't know if why, as women, we tend to be more reluctant to push ourselves forward. But one piece of advice that I got from somebody a long time ago is, ask one of your friends, someone who knows you well, to describe you and say what's good about you, and you'll be really stunned at how good you actually are. I think we notoriously underestimate our own skills and abilities. Yeah. And and having someone else externally to you, sort of almost kind of like create that for you, is so much easier. It really, really, really helps you to see, about yourself in a different light. Is that something that you've come across as well, Diane?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly, when people have said, what are your skills? I sit down and think, I haven't got any skills. I'm just me, who I am. And I find it hard to quantify what those skills are. And then you're right, when you ask somebody, they say, oh, well, you can do this, and you can talk the hind leg off a donkey, which is a skill. It is one of those areas where I think, I find our company is very female dominated, and I am pushing the women in their career and holding back the men. The men are more pushy about their career aspirations and their, promotion prospects, etc. And the women tend to be more happy to just sit back. That does not mean that the women are not wanting those promotions. They're just not self-promoting in the same way. But I think that's a gross generalization, because there are definitely men who are in that category that we would put women in, and vice versa. But I think it's, we create stereotypes for a reason, and that's because that is the norm. But yeah, and I think with my own career, I can remember being managerless in a department, and there was no plan put in place for what was going to happen, and things were not working out well. I think they just hoped regulatory would get on with things, and things were falling through the cracks, and there was no authority in the department. And I sort of went along and said, what's happening? And they said, well, you're in charge. And I thought, well, this isn't what I expected. And very quickly, we got a new managing director who came in and then said, oh, I want to elevate this to a board position. And I'm thinking, I am not qualified for this at all. And sometimes you get things almost thrust upon you, and really is sink or swim, and you just have to kind of get on with things. And that's I think once I went through that experience, it was so frightening. It was like, I'm on the verge of tears speaking in a board meeting, because I have not been at this level or anywhere near this level before. This is just this crazy guy who's come in and decided this is what he's going to do with my career. And I think after that point, I don't think that, apart from speaking in public, I don't think anything else has ever frightened me, because that was such a frightening thing to do. But yeah, so women and men, I don't know. I think it's it depends on the company, it depends on the people, it depends, you know, if it is a very male dominated company, it is definitely more difficult for women to push into that. I think sometimes when it's a very female dominated company, you also have to make efforts to get men to be higher up in that organization. So I think the best thing is to have a good balance.
Yeah, I think I found in my experience when I've you know, developed teams that are a good split between both, is they've been the most successful, because remembering that every person in the team brings certain skill sets, it's really helped get a nice rounded holistic team that's been able to deliver, you know. And I think just as a manager, as you progress in your career, I think it's the you know, that there's a responsibility of a good manager to keep an eye on those things like Diane was mentioning, and making sure that you don't just wait for someone to proactively ask, that you actually can say that person needs to move forward and you can guide them. And I remember one occasion, one of my team, I actively helped him leave the organization, not because he wasn't any good. He was the best person that I had in the team and the most useful and the most valuable. However, it wasn't going to help his career to stay where he was, because the business identified success by how much business development could you do, and he wasn't interested in it at all, and he was hopeless. That's it. And he said to me, I really am uncomfortable here. So I said, right, okay, you know what, take that skill set that you have and be, you know, where you know you can thrive and you're comfortable as an individual, and go to somewhere. Anyway, I helped him find somewhere else where he would fit and be able to develop in his career and move forward, that would support him, rather than trying to keep him selfishly, you know, and have the poor guy being very uncomfortable or not move his career forward.
So I think
Yes,
that's,
I mean, I can't.
Sorry, go on, Richard. Sorry.
I was going to say, like I say, being male, I sort of I can't comment too much on the other side. But yeah, probably, I don't know if that's true or not, but I have heard it before. So I guess there must be some truth in it. And I think I'm trying to think when I've moved functions, I sort of so something that everybody should be aware of, regardless of their gender or anything else, is when somebody puts a job application on, this is their ideal requirements. They're not really expecting somebody to be able to tick every single box. If somebody can, they'll employ them, right? So, but the chances are they probably won't find them, or their personality doesn't fit anyway. So just bear that in mind. But at the same time, if you're only ticking off, you know, 20% quite literally, that, or you don't have any other experience, then, you know, perhaps you're chancing your arm. But you know, this is where sort of talking to people about, you know, what skills are required, and sort of, but also thinking about what are your transferable skills. What are the things that you've got? So you've not done that job before, but what are the skill sets that you've got that could be used in that job? And, you know, if you're moving into a scientific job, but within sales or within regulatory or manufacturing or something like that, maybe your skill sets could still be applied even though you haven't done that. So that's what I would sort of just say to yourselves: if you fancy something, don't rule yourself out, have a go. But, you know, be a little bit realistic and put the work in. And it's hard work sitting down and thinking, how does the skill sets that I've got now doing what I do, how do they translate to a job that I only know a little bit about? Yeah. But have a go, and that's what you're going to need for your interview. And I think that's probably what I'd say. And probably the last thing to say is, you know, I've worked with many different nationalities, and I've worked with many different functions. And I think that there are differences between stereotypes everywhere. So US people are more pushy than UK people. UK people are more pushy than the Scandinavians, perhaps. So these sort of stereotypes do come out, but of course there are a lot of variations between. And so this self-promotion idea, if you're, you know, you're a US company, you're going to have to get used to a little bit of self-promotion, because that's what they do in the US. But between functions as well, so regulatory people are probably less pushy than people working in sales, right? You sort of, and so so if you're in a lab, you're probably on the less pushy front, and you probably need to step outside your comfort zone, and if you're wanting to sort of try and get into an area that's different.
And just to say, I have employed someone who'd worked for 6 years as a zookeeper.
Wow.
And has been promoted twice since she came here, and is one of our team leaders. So, you know, don't think, oh, I've never done that before, I can't possibly do it. It's, yeah, I think, you know, the possibilities are endless.
So I think there was some really excellent advice there. I mean, I think having a healthy understanding of what your capabilities are, realistic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to your point, Lynn, I think great advice. Go and ask somebody else to comment, right? Because we're often not the best at recognizing what our talents are. And I think, Richard, your point there around, really thinking about what are those transferable skills, and I think an excellent example I had around, sometimes people can really bring very strong transferable skills, even if they've never been part of our industry before, right? And I think as leaders in the areas of science and business that we are, it's our duty to try and keep an open mind and be able to bring people in and recognize that where those talents really are. So I'm really pleased about that, that you've brought up those subjects. So yeah, I think something else that I've thought about is it comes back to that networking piece, and I think the example of I helped somebody leave a role that they weren't particularly well suited for and get a better role. That's not, in some respects it's a loss, I guess, but in other respects you're gaining, right? Because you now have somebody in your network who you can speak to about how their career is developing, or if you need it, there's always going to be somebody there who's going to be, I guess, very supportive as well of you as you work through that. So if you've got any examples where you've similar things have happened, I think it would be interesting to share those, examples where you've mentored or helped somebody through and then maintained that perhaps maintained that relationship with them as they've either moved outside of your organization or as their career has developed.
Personally, I've got quite a few. They're all, I think, the key thing, I think, is what enables you to be really good at that is to understand people, an ability to understand what drives people. And I think it's very back to the very, very beginning when we're talking about what makes you choose a career or what makes you sort of stay and enjoy what you do. It's that knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're passionate about and knowing that, you work hard. Someone in an earlier session said, people work hard in things they believe in, so really, and that's so true. Yeah, so it's like just helping, being able to read people and understand where they feel they're happy, and you can start to analyze them a little bit. Sounds a little bit sort of big brothery, but I think that's the sort of bit that I enjoy doing, and therefore, and it's chatting with people, and it's like talking with people and just getting to know them, and then people open up and you open up about what your dreams and aspirations are, and I think that helps you help other people. I'm not wanting to name names of people that I may have kind of.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'd agree. If somebody's working with you and they're not in the right place, I mean, one of the things that, well, I'd probably get shot by all the clients that I used to work for in Big Pharma, but because I was an independent consultant going into work for them, I would quite often have a little trail of people following me up to lunch so that they could grab my attention and have a chat about careers in regulatory affairs, and they weren't happy in the Big Pharma and they wanted to try something else, and what was it like working in a small company, and what was it like working in consultancy, etc. And there are a lot of them that I am still loosely in touch with. I mean, certainly over LinkedIn, LinkedIn with these people and see what they're doing now, and it was an opportunity to talk about, different career options for people, because Big Pharma definitely doesn't suit everybody. And we quite often have conversations about what they could do either within the same company if they wanted to do something different, or giving them some advice on, or them asking for some advice and then giving it on. I wasn't just trying to push everyone out of there, but just trying to see what they were looking for and what they might be interested in doing. So but probably wouldn't have been too popular with the management doing things like that. But at the same time, if people are unhappy, then, you know, there needs to be some turnaround sometimes in companies, and you really don't want a department full of people who are not happy and not motivated. So it gives you the opportunity to bring in somebody who's a better fit.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever helped to ease somebody into a different career outwards, but I think there's certainly been, I've worked with plenty of relatively junior people who've come in from different functions into business development, and sort of had chats with them and then mentored them as they sort of grow through the business development role. And my claim to fame, I guess, is that when I worked for ASI, a Japanese company, had a Japanese lady come to join us and understand a bit more about Europe, and she's relatively junior, so helped. She then became the head of business development a couple of years after I left. So that's my claim to fame.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty impressive, I think.
Yeah. I hope she still owes me.
Well, you might have to call her in a favor some point if you need that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I guess, you know, we're getting, I guess, towards the end of the session here, but one question I think would be really interesting to reflect a little bit on is, you know, when you look back at your careers, why do you think you've been successful in your careers? Were there any sort of key moments, or, you know, key decisions, or key skill sets that you picked up when you think back to your career and how it's developed?
I think a lot of the time I was in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm perfectly honest, I don't think it was any particular drive that I've had to do certain things that has really catapulted my career. I mean, I'm quite a driven person, but I think, and even running a business, I didn't have a plan to have the business as it is now. This was not my, in 18 years, we will be 120 people. You know, it was one of those things. IT said, I've built you a little system, you can have up to 10 users. And I said, well, we'll never need more than 10 users. That's fine. Thank you very much. So, but I'm, you know, my personality profile, I'm not a planner. I'm not somebody who has wild ambitions to do things, but what I am doing, I want to do it, you know, the best, and to improve what we're doing, and to, you know, help people's careers, to help our clients. It's all, you know, about trying to do the best thing with what we currently have, and not about building some big empire or anything like that. And so I think yeah, that's me really. It's not anything particularly complicated or well planned.
Richard, does any of that resonate with you, or
Yeah,
would you say
I mean, it wasn't, you know, I think I would never have been able to sort of when I left the lab, I sort of would never have been able to predict where I was going to end up. You know, you end up, and it might have been an equally interesting job might have popped up, and I would have jumped into that and be somewhere else. So I think it's that level of interest. But for me, it was, you know, I'd always had an interest on the business side of things as well, and but always pursued the science route because that's what really interested me. But trying to join the two together was always interesting. I was always more interested in the applied part of the science than the purely academic part of it. So that sort of led me well, I suppose. And but you I think, as Diane was saying, you sort of you go outside your comfort zone for the first time, you realize you can do it, and you do it a second time, it's not quite so difficult, and then you start to realize that, okay, I can take that on. I've not done it before, but you know, I can have a go, and I've got to work out how to do it. Obviously, you need a certain level of background knowledge before you just leap in there both feet. But and I think that's helped me throughout my career, and you know, helped me to develop within my eventual business path of negotiating deals, and sort of now working with companies. You know, I enjoy networking with people now. It's some of my skills are learnt. You know, my natural behaviour is a little bit more to be in my shell, but I've always had a social element to me as well, and I think that's grown to sort of to encompass what I need to do in order to do my job, and I enjoy doing it.
Lynn, reflections from you?
Yeah, so I think I kind of like a bit like Richard, I've always had that kind of almost inner friction between research, science, and commercial. I did it when I did my first degree. I did it in chemistry and economics, You know, it sounds like a weird mix. It's kind of like probably. So I always wanted to do the science, but I really had a passion for the commercial as well. And so I think what drove me and what the path I was trying to find was, where could I marry those two equally? So it's tough to find that. And the other challenge I had was boredom. You know, and I'm sure, you know, we're all quite intellectual people. We're challenged. We like to be challenged. And I found when I started my career outside of academia, it was like I've changed company 4 times in sort of like 6-8 years. And I made sure I stuck to nearly 2 years in each one to get a flavor, but then thought, you know what, this isn't right for me. I'm missing something now, you know. And so what I discovered then was that actually, if I then pivoted over to agency side, I could do the core work that I love doing, but for multiple different types of people. So that way I got the kind of the excitement, the spread, the new things, and, you know, but then kept that core expertise. And Diane's nodding because she's probably in a similar sort of scenario to me. You know, every day was something new. And also, by being able to work in life sciences, I've worked with some really cool cutting edge technology, service providers, some therapeutics, and sort of gone, actually, you know what? They're doing all the hard work. I get to do the fun stuff by talking about what they're doing, which gives you a incredibly privileged position. But that's what kind of like, then I found my sort of like spot of that's what really motivates me and makes me really happy. Yeah, and I think an element of it, all these things, all the way is being in the right place at the right time, as Diane said. Yeah. And my one added bit to this is having a partner that kicks you up the butt if you get too complacent. You know, my other half made me take that massive leap at one point in my career to move down to Cornwall for a job. Yeah, and it was the best thing I ever did. But, you know, so sometimes you just need a, you know, a little bit of a push or the right support, but, you know.
Yeah, probably just adding one thing. I mean, we're talking about poachers turn gatekeepers, so we've all flipped from our original science base to something a bit different. But I mean, that's not to say that if you're a gamekeeper, you could stay as a gamekeeper, but you're always going to have to challenge yourself. You're not going to, presumably you're not going to stay where you are. So I know some very good friends who have stayed within the science track, but, you know, so one friend who eventually moved into biotech and became a CSO of a biotech, and then when that sold out is now a CEO of a biotech. So absolutely plugged into the science, but develops a load of other skills that you need to do that. I know Melly Pangalos as well from the days back in the lab, who's now sort of one of this on the senior leadership team of AstraZeneca. So again, he's still plugged absolutely into the science, but he's dealing with people and sites and, you know, governments and all sorts of stuff. So you know, so that so, you know, even within your chosen route, make sure you push your envelope and sort of like understand what your skills are and sort of follow your desires.
No, well, I think that's a great place to leave it. And thank you very much for your contribution to this session. I've enjoyed it enormously. It's been great to meet you all. And I certainly hope that those who are dialed in have enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing, John.
Bye,
Great job.
No problem.
Yeah, enjoy your career.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Bye. So I guess now that brings us on to the award. And the award is for the Life Sciences Inspiration of the Year 2023. And this is a really important award, I think, because it really identifies exceptional individuals within the life science industry. It's always, I think, important to have those role model individuals that show us and help us understand what is the best that we can be. And I think this year's shortlist was a really exceptional shortlist. So those that were nominated for votes were Anya Miller, who's Program Director of LifeArc Technology Transfer Fellowship Program, Sarah Howell, who's CEO of Arcor, Tom Mander, who is the CEO of DomainX, Lewis White, who's mechanical engineering team leader at SciTech, and Zeb Yunus, principal consultant and head of CMC at Zendaya. Now, everybody's had a chance to vote, and the voting was finished at 12. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce the winner. I don't have a drum to roll, but I'm sure you can use your imagination, because this year's winner is Zeb Yunus, who was principal consultant and head of CMC at Zendaya. Zeb joined the team as a principal consultant in 2021, and since then she's been inspiring team members across all areas of the organization, showing both immense leadership qualities and unparalleled product development expertise, which has catalyzed her promotion to head of CMC. Zeb continues to show her commitment to the mentoring and development of regulatory professionals, evidenced not only through the management of the internal training sessions, such as company-wide lunch and learn and one-to-one mentorship, but also through her extracurricular participation in the renowned TOPRA and ECCRT training courses. So Zeb, many, many congratulations, thoroughly deserved. If you'd like to say a few words, please do so.
Oh, thank you so much. I think everyone in this industry, the fact that you were here, the presence and giving even this talk, everyone, we just naturally want to share knowledge and bring everyone up with us. And it's funny because we're British and it's hard to accept but it's very sweet. But I think we're all driven to do that, and it's lovely to have it recognized. Thank you so much. Thanks, John.
You're very welcome. And with that, I guess I have to hand it back now to Tony Jones, who will wrap everything up. So Tony, take it away. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks very much. And I'd just like to add my congratulations to Zeb. I think many people inspire myself and many others in this industry on a daily basis. And we see that play out again and again with great leadership and partnership struck and great insight and innovation. So that's what makes this industry so great to be even a small part of. It remains for me really to thank our sponsors and supporters for helping us deliver this event. And of course, all the speakers that have been very candid in sharing their views. And I think the things that really kept recurring as themes for me, I felt, were irrespective almost the topic under discussion, it was just about, it's a people thing. You know, careers are adventures, and it's exciting at times, it's demoralizing at other times and worrying, but actually you build up and you use your networks and build those, and you get strength from other people as well as yourselves. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for being so candid and sharing their biographies in that way, because other people learn and take inspiration from it. And I guess it was just this thing about be bold and be fearless and always be curious. You know, ask questions of people, try different things, and see what makes you tick and where you excel. So for that, just a reminder, the platform remains open for 4 weeks if people still want to connect and network online and go back and look at some of the sessions that perhaps they watched but would like a recap or weren't able to make in real time. There's some real depth of advice there. So thanks everybody for making it successful. And thanks to the One Nucleus team members involved in delivering it. They will know who they are. And we look forward to seeing you next year, if not at events other than the careers events in between now and then. So thanks very much.